Boom. We are live. Welcome. Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is the Stress and Financial Wellbeing webinar series. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we started this last week, and each time we're doing both topics twice. So this is week two of us doing this topic. The first time we do the topic, we do it on Zoom, which is a much more intimate space, whereas with LinkedIn, which is usually week two, it opens it up to the public and it's usually a bit more interactive. So that's what we're expecting today. But how you doing, Natasha?
Yes, I'm very, very well. How are
Me.
you?
I'm good. I'm good actually, ready to rumble. And what we'll do as well is as we move, we'll introduce ourselves properly. But I'm going to start sharing our presentation. It's going to be maybe about 40 minutes between the two of us, and then afterwards we're going to introduce how we can help at the end of it. Because as we introduce ourselves, we give a little bit of background into what and why we're doing this, and it will make sense as we go. So let me begin with this. Here we go. All right. So this is the financial impact of burnout webinar series, and it's based for teachers. And I guess before we jump in, the first question I would ask you just to think about is why this topic is important for you. There's going to be a reason why you're here, right? You've got 1,001 things you could possibly be doing. You're scrolling on LinkedIn and you come across this topic and there's something that made you click on it. So a question I would ask you is what is the motivation for this particular topic, financial well-being, financial impact of burnout? For teachers, why is that important to you? Is it for you yourself as an educator? Is it for you as an institution? Maybe you're a parent and you're wondering about how the teachers are doing. Maybe you're considering going into teaching and not sure. Maybe you're as a teacher and you're thinking of leaving because of the stresses. Who knows? It could be all kinds of reasons, but have a think about why this topic is important for you. And as this session goes, I just wanted to go through a very high level covering of what we're going to cover. First bit, which we're doing right now, is the welcome and house rules. Then we're going to have about 20 minutes on the financial wellness, and that is going to be led by Natasha. Then it's going to be on stress and burnout, which is covered by me. And then towards the end, we're going to have Q&A, which is going to be an opportunity for you to ask any questions. And we'd encourage that as we go, there's going to be interactive parts, which we'll ask you to put into the comments. But if there's any specific questions, write them down or hold them in any way and leave them to the end or drop them in the comments and we'll answer them towards the end or where it makes sense. And then at the very end, we have an offer for you. So just being transparent with offering these services to schools because we know they need help. And so without further ado, let's start with a few house rules while we're here. So the number one is assume positive intent. So from us as well as anyone else in the chat group, we're all here for the same reason. We want to learn, we want to have better experiences. And anything that's said that might be, I'm not sure where that comes from, assume positive intent. Number two is speak for yourself. Me, as a young black male, can only really speak on behalf of me. I don't represent all young people. I don't represent all black people. I don't represent all males in terms of how we think. We're not a monolith. So when you're doing something or asking or telling or sharing, try and keep that in mind. We're speaking for ourselves as individuals. Confidentiality matters. Now, right now, we're going to be on LinkedIn. So this is going to be an open space. So if there's anything that is confidential information, please don't share it in such a public forum. Maybe it's something you can send to us individually afterwards or direct message us to ask about. But this will be a public platform. So try and keep that in mind. Next one is respect different perspectives. Not everyone is going to be thinking the same as you, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. And it doesn't mean they're right. But we're going to respect each other's perspectives. Next one is engage, don't dominate. So as we go, that first 20 minutes is going to be us leading, but we're going to give opportunities towards the Q&A for you to engage as well. And please don't dominate that conversation. Fortunately, in this space, it's going to be more in chat, so we can moderate that. But especially when you come back and join us in one of these sessions as a Zoom, it becomes really important. No judgment, only growth. Now, this is linked to quite a few of the things that we mentioned already, but try and come with a space of not judgment. Judgment gives the idea that you know what is right and other people don't, which might be the case. But what we find is if you lead with curiosity instead, then it can kind of open a much more fruitful discussion. Next one is take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Not everything is going to be applicable for you. You might be in a different stage of your journey. You might have had different experiences, but if it doesn't represent your experience, leave it at the table. It might be valuable for somewhere else, but take what resonates with you. And for last but not least, I mentioned this before, but save your questions to paste it towards the end Q&A. Right. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Natasha, who's going to share with you the financial well-being side of things. Over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Andre. Can everybody see this screen?
Boom. There we go. I've just shared it.
Oh, thank you. So, good evening. As Andre has said, my name's Natasha. I am a financial well-being expert. And this topic is on the impact on burnout. It's just a simple guide to improve well-being for all educators. Bear with me. I'm just going to check one more time.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. So I talk about financial well-being because it's one of those topics that is a bit of a taboo. In the United Kingdom, we don't like to express what we say regarding money. We don't like to share our income and our salary. So therefore, sometimes it's a bit of a touchy subject. But I'm very, very mindful that we all need to consider our well-being when it comes to money. And the well-being when it comes to money is the ability to manage your money and feel secure about your finances. Is about being able to deal with the unexpected costs and plan for the future. All of us have a salary. Some of us like our salaries, some of us don't. But the most important thing to do right now is in order to manage it. And unfortunately, every single one of us will experience the unexpected. Are we capable? Are we well equipped to deal with unexpected costs and plan for the future? So when we discuss well-being, there are many benefits to it. Obviously, one of the main biggest benefits when we discuss well-being is our mental health. Obviously, sometimes with our physical health, when we're stressed, it manifests in high blood pressure. When we don't consider our well-being, it affects our relationships with our spouse, our partners, and our children and our community. And when we are also able to consider our well-being, it benefits our productivity. So this is a really vital topic because it encompasses everything pertaining to your life. Now, about me, I talk about financial well-being because my background is in finance. I did do a bit of asset management in my early career, and I've experienced a few financial challenges. I've been able to make a lot of money early in my career. I've been unemployed with 2 young children, and now I'm self-employed. So you can see over the last 20, 25 years, my income has fluctuated from a lot, not enough, to peaks and troughs. So this is why I talk about financial well-being. So I speak on personal finance, women in enterprise, resilience at home, and our relationship with money. But today I'm focusing on my unsung heroes, which are the teachers. I have been fortunate enough to go to schools and teach personal finance to young people. And obviously the teacher is in the room with me as I'm teaching, and they are telling me after the workshop how important, how insightful these sessions were to them, and that how they wished what I had shared with the young person, I had shared with them directly. Hence the reason why we're here today. So the impact of the burnout is pertaining to two people, you and the school. For you, a financial impact is the increased stress, poor mental health, and poor financial decision making, because sometimes when we're stressed, obviously it affects our mental health and then we can't make sound decisions. The impact also affects our career decisions and our job satisfaction, because we all of a sudden consider, should I quit this job as a teacher because I can't cope with all the marking and the stress, and maybe I can pivot into a new career. But are you making that decision because of the job or the impact of the burnout or your financial well-being? And also the impact pertains onto your relationships with one another. Some of us, and I've met a few people, are very good with their finances personally, but then sometimes we marry somebody who's the opposite to us and may not be as good with finances as we are. Now, the impact of the burnout for schools is obviously the direct costs associated with turnover. Some teachers need to quit. It's just how they have to leave the job. So obviously the school now has to replace that person who's left, train them, go through all the substitute teachers to replace you. And then the indirect cost is the decreased productivity and engagement affecting students. With a turnover of teachers, students are having to form new relationships with new teachers in the 5 years that they're in school, which can sometimes affect them and the school overall. Now, I'm here to say that with financial well-being, there are ways and means that we can improve your financial well-being, okay? Ways and means to improve your financial being. So I've got 5 really easy tips for us to remember. The first one being financial habits. We all have habits. Some of our habits are good, some of us are bad, some of it is positive or negative. Whatever habit you have right now, could you ask yourself if this is something that you agree with or disagree with? A positive financial habit is being able to budget, savings in the sense of as an emergency fund. Do you have 3 months worth of living expenses tucked away in a savings account? So if you were ever to be made unemployed, you have enough money to keep you going until you find a new job. Good financial habit is, are you managing your debt? Do you have a relationship with your creditors? Are you able to pay the full amount on a credit card, or are you paying above the minimum? Do you even open the letters when you see a credit card statement? I know a lot of people, they don't even open the letters. Ignorance is bliss to them, so they don't want to know. And another good habit to have is to invest. Some people take advantage of their ISA. Now, the negative aspect and the negative financial habits are overspending. Social media, online shopping is so easy to put things in the basket and click buy now. Are we ignoring debt, like I mentioned? And do we not have an emergency fund for the unexpected that could happen to every single one of us at any time? We all appreciate that there's a rising cost of living, but as costs are going up, we are also fortunate that on our phones we are able to be savvy. We have so much apps and technology and information right now that shows us how to use comparison websites. Are we taking advantage of discount codes? Are we negotiating with our providers regarding a payment plan? For example, if we pay our electricity bill quarterly, have we asked to pay it monthly, so it's therefore smaller chunks and manageable? Do we have smart meters? This might sound obvious, but sometimes we don't consider it. We see the costs rising, but we also are empowered because we have comparison websites that can give us information in the split second of who is the cheapest provider at time T. So let's take advantage of the comparison websites. Do we discuss our salary? Sometimes it's always easy. I can't manage it. I don't have enough finances. I need a pay rise. But sometimes the pay rise obviously takes a lot of time to document evidence, demonstrate to your employer why you were qualified for a pay rise. So therefore, that's not an instant thing to improve your well-being. So it's a long-term strategy to improve your well-being, but it's not instant. Hence the reason why I went to the previous slide about financial habits. Those are quick things that you can demonstrate now and change now, whilst the long-term game is negotiating your salary. I discuss relationships. Your financial well-being and how to improve it is to let your loved ones know that there's pressure on you right now. You can't cope with the demands, you're stressed. And if you pick the thing about financial pressures and well-being, we don't discuss it with anybody and we keep it to ourselves. So your partner doesn't know that you can't afford the 5-star hotel in Spain because you haven't told them that money is not as liquid as it once was. So please discuss your financial pressures with your family. When it comes to debt, distinguishing what is a priority debt and a non-priority debt. I always say this, that there are dogs who bark with no bite, and those dogs are what I call credit card companies. Why? Because they're not going to evict you from your home and they're not going to cut off your supply. Obviously, after a while, they will cut off, but initially they don't if you miss the first few payments. and they won't send you to prison. So your priority debtors is your mortgage and your rent, because obviously you can be evicted, your gas and your utility bills because they can cut off your supply. And those are the things that we focus on first. So find out who your priority debtors are and let's have a conversation with them. Then we can talk to your non-priority, which is the credit card companies. There are two ways of managing debt: the snowboard and the avalanche. Again, I can discuss this further. And finally, the best resource is to take action right now. Everything I am saying is actionable right now. I don't want people to take on so much information that is overwhelming. These are small key steps that we can action now just to take the edge of that burnout and that up and coming stress that is pending. We know the impact on schools, like I discussed before, it's the turnover, school culture. When teachers don't feel supported and motivated by their senior leadership, it impacts the school because you have got so many other things on your mind that on that day you're not functioning as well as you could be. It impacts the school on their student success because the environment that you're in is not conducive for learning. And obviously, it impacts the school based on performance. If your well-being is poor, it affects your teaching effectiveness, and therefore your appetite to even continue to do professional development courses, because even right now you're too stressed to go and do another CPD training. I say all of this to say, when it comes to your well-being, it's so and so important to advocate for your wellness. Okay, advocate for your wellness. Let your senior leadership team know that the long-term vision of the school aligns with your well-being, and it's the school's mission to provide high-quality education based on your well-being. You can't offer your school that you work in today high-quality education if your well-being is poor. So it's really important to vocalize what is going on with you, with the senior leadership team. Also, let them know, they may or may not know, but it is a physiosocial hazard not to implement wellness programs on your behalf. It's their legal obligation to advocate, to provide these kinds of wellness programs so you can be as productive as possible. So if your senior leadership team don't know this, please let them know. And I know with any type of well-being, it's always about a budget and finances, but allow your senior leadership team to know there is a return on investment when the staff in the school have received well-being training, have had their concerns being heard, feel like their issues are being acknowledged, because it will prove the teacher retention in your school, reduce the absenteeism, and increase the productivity of the school, therefore long-term savings. But my biggest key thing that I would take from this session today: advocate for your wellness. And you have done that by participating in this webinar. It's just that you need to now let your employer know, the senior leadership team know, that you need extra. We do have further sessions in our webinar, me and Andre. Next week, we're going to be I will be talking about building resilience, navigating challenges. I like to talk about challenges in scenarios. So we'll have a scenario A, B, and C. How would we pivot and how would we react to those situations? How to reframe our thoughts and more financial strategies. Then 2 weeks after that, on the 15th of April, we are having a webinar on securing your future. Let's make the foundation of our well-being strong now so that future you is stable and confident to enjoy the fruits of your labor so far, so that your future is as bright as possible and therefore your long-term well-being. Thank you, Andre.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And if you're in the comments right now, please do put any responses, because that was a strong presentation. I know there's going to be a lot of things that are probably going to be working through your mind that right now. And so if you can put them as questions in the chats, because I see some of you who are jumping in on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us. Put your questions in the chats and we'll make sure that when it comes to the Q&A section at the end, we're going to go back over them to make sure we answer them all. All right. So without further ado, I think it's my turn now, isn't it? Come on.
It's
This is great time. All right. Okay, cool. So back to me. I am your burnout coach. So I like that little transition there. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so I'm the burnout coach and I actually have a background in architecture and dance. I know it sounds like two really random backgrounds, but they kind of work together. The architecture side is my structural side, you know, all the systems, etc., and the logical thinking. And then the dancer side is very, very creative. And I bring that into the way I coach as well. I'm ICF certified, but I'm coach, facilitator, and speaker. And I work with leadership as well as teams. So now it seems that there's a calling into education. People like Natasha have been calling me up and saying, you know, and we have conversations about collaborating on things that help within the educational sector. And it's just been really rewarding following that. But one of the things that I wanted to share that I'm getting from those conversations is a few things that keep cropping up. One is that the bills are rising, but the pay isn't, right? And then the other one is having to cut back on things and sacrificing, trying side hustles because the singular income isn't enough, changing everyday providers like energy, water, gas to be able to get the most economically viable one, meal prepping, budgeting down to the last penny. But even then, there's too much month at the end of the money. And so I would love you if you are able to relate to any of that, just type me in the comments if this is something that you've experienced, whether it's something, whether you're a teacher or not, in fact, because I realize it's not just an educational issue, but we are focusing on education at the moment. Just type me in the comments if this is something you've experienced. And you've probably put in so many bits of effort to kind of find ways to make things work, but for whatever reason, it's still getting to that stage where it's just not enough. So, yeah, Mr. Beasy says, amazing advice, Natasha, as well from the previous part. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely. Welcome, welcome, Kemi. Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Mr. Beasy. Margaret, I saw you earlier on as well. Welcome as well. Thank you so much for being here and sharing it. And okay, cool. I'm going to jump on to the next part now. Let me see if I can bring that back. All right. So now let's get to it. So one of the things I wanted to do right now is a really practical part when it comes to burnout. And one of the reasons why burnout can feel this way is because we build a lot of tension within our bodies. So I know we've absorbed a lot of information from Natasha. I've told you a little bit about what I do. And as I ended that, I gave you a certain experiences that you may or may not relate to, but especially if you do, you might find that you're feeling something within your body. There might be tensions happening, maybe in your chest, in your stomach, in your throat, in your back, in your shoulders, in your head. You might be feeling like, oh, that relates to me. And there's a little bit of tension, stress might be showing up in your body already. And I wanted to give this little exercise, and I'm going to give you 2 breathing exercises that can help calm all of that and channel that energy into something that you can use. So the first one is what we call box breathing. So I'm going to give you 3 seconds in, 3 seconds hold, 3 seconds out, 3 seconds hold. We're going to do it 3 times just so we can play around with the idea and see how it works. Okay. So I encourage you, wherever you are right now, you might be in your car, you might be in your house, you might be still at work, you might be in the office, still classrooms checking papers and all this kind of stuff. But while you're listening, just give this exercise a try. We're going to try it in 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Last time. Breathe in. 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. And relax. Okay, this is a really good exercise, especially if you know what's coming up. If you're going into a meeting, if you're going into parents' evening, you're going into something that might be challenging. Maybe there's a student or your head teacher or something. There's a report that's coming on Ofsted, whatever it might be. You might have a situation where you're going into a quite a potentially stressful situation. I find that really good to calm you down before you get into it. But then also leaving a stressful situation, and you kind of want to process what you've gone through. Your body's on high alert and you need to chill out a little bit. I find that really good. The second exercise I'm going to give you is called the physiological sigh. And this is really good for when you're in the situation. So if you're in a moment and you're immediately triggered by something has gone wrong, or you find yourself flushed with energy and anxiety or whatever that might be, and you find yourself really panicking, for example, this is a really good one to do. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 deep breaths in with your nose. The first one is going to be quite big. The second one is going to be big but sharp. And then you're going to breathe out through your mouth in a long, long exhale, right? I'm going to give you one example and then we're going to do it together. The example will be like this. Okay. So now let's try this together. 3, 2, 1. Cool. Now, what you might find is I find that there's usually about 2 or 3 different responses to this particular exercise. One is it's going to relax you immediately. So even in a stressful situations, now I'll encourage you to try this the next time you find yourself in a situation. Think about the physiological side, give it a try and see how you're able to relax a bit before you respond to whatever's going on, right? The second one is that something will come to the surface. There'll be an emotion, something you can tangibly feel in your body. Maybe there's a tension in your body that you weren't aware of. Something will be brought to the surface, right? But it's really good because there's intelligence within the body. Sometimes we can't find the words for how we feel. Sometimes there's a lot of things going on internally. We're not really sure where it is. And this is a really good exercise to, one, either calm that into something that we can control and process, or bring it up to the surface so we can deal with it. All right. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, but the first thing I'm going to bring in is this quote by John Maxwell. And it says, "The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails." If there's one thing I want you to take away from today is the idea that to focus on the things that you can control. And often that thing is us. What can you do within the body? What can you do within your choices, your decisions? Focus on those things, because often if you are focusing on the things you actually don't have control over, that can be a cause of stress as well. But there's 2 specific concepts I want you to understand before we move on to something deeper. The first one, actually, before we get to that, sorry, is ask yourself this question: how do you notice stress showing up in your financial decisions? So this is a question that's linking what all the things that Natasha mentioned. She mentioned, spontaneous buying. She mentioned, long-term and short-term debt relief and how you're going to handle that. Thinking about spending, thinking about saving, thinking about investing. So a question I have for you, which I would encourage you to put in the chats, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're watching it live or afterwards, is answer the question: how do you notice stress showing up within your financial decisions? Okay. And I'm just gonna look into the chats at the moment. So yes, hello Alexandra, good evening, welcome. um Jonas is saying the link to the feedback form doesn't open. Maybe attendees will need to copy and paste into the browser. What we can do is if you're on LinkedIn, I can put that there as well, if that's okay, Natasha.
I've sent it again, so that should work as a longer link.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yes, perfect. All right, cool. And so the question again on the screen is: how do you notice stress showing up in your financial decisions? One thing I want you to consider, because I worded this specifically, is how do you notice stress showing up in your financial decisions? Because sometimes stress shows up in our financial decisions and we don't really notice it because it might be within a tolerance, which I'll talk about in a moment. Often we find ourselves in fight or flight. A bill has shown up. You're in a situation where you're looking at the cash flow and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't make this decision right now. And we often make decisions within that moment of stress, and that's when you might notice it happening. We've got a LinkedIn user saying mine comes out in being over frugal. Yeah, that's other way as well, like actually being over frugal and not wanting to spend and hoarding and panicking about losing it, going from that fear state, right? What if I can't? What if this isn't going to be here tomorrow? And so let me put it together as something beforehand. Um, Natasha mentioned one of them is just ignoring. So we call that the ostrich, putting your head in the sand and just pretending that you didn't see that red envelope that that came in through the post. So I'll encourage you to think about this question. How do you notice stress showing up in your financial decisions as we go on to the next section? So one thing to notice is the stress curve. So the stress curve is like a really good example because stress itself isn't a problem. Stress is actually useful. It's there for a purpose. And one of the things I do with clients is remind them that we want to be careful demonizing the things that come natural to us that are here for a purpose. Stress is there so that we have the energy to do an action. And so if you have too little stress, you find yourself in the green, but where you're bored, there's a lack of motivation. And then stress comes to an optimal point where you're actually performing at your best, which is when you actually do the thing and you're highly focused, you're in flow state and everything is going well. The problem happens when we go into the red area, when we feel stressed, which is when start to feel anxiety and overwhelm, and there's too many demands and there's too much to do in too little time, when you too much to care about. There's all these things going on in the world and you don't feel like you can do anything about it. And then the final part is exhaustion and burnout, when we basically short circuit our fuse. So a question I would ask you to think about is, when is your stress in the green, amber, and red? What kind of things get you into those states? The reason why I'm asking that question is, if you were to take most of us here are probably going to be adults, right? But if you were to go back to your primary school books and answer any of those questions, you'll find them easy. There's not going to be any stress, because you've grown so much in that state. You can look at the same issue that used to be stressful when you were 5, 10 years old and you're going into those exams, but now seem easy, right? So your capacity for that kind of issue is changed, right? This, in the same way, what ends up happening is, as we go through stress in stressful situations, you might find yourself growing. Something that might be stressful to you now, if you go through it 2 or 3 times, won't be as stressful later. So the point of this is that noticing that how stressful something is might change depending on your experiences. Something that might be in red now might be in amber or green sometime later on in life. So it's just to know that there is opportunity for you yourself to grow. One of the things I'm really big on is, if I'm working with you as a client, I'm not trying to reduce the size of the issue. I'm trying to increase your size, so that issue plus anything else seems smaller. Next up is this stress cycle, which is actually how stress functions. And I'm going to point out one thing that is really important about this stress cycle, which is where this problems start. Normally you're in neutral. So your body's in a neutral state. Everything's going fine or everything's going well. And then something happens. You have a parents' evening or an exam period or Ofsted or anything like that comes up. And that's when stress starts to build. You notice that there's something coming up. The middle part, which is the fight or flight, is when your stress comes. So stress is adrenaline and cortisol in the body. It gives you that energy to do the thing, but it needs to be channeled into the thing. And then the fourth stage is when it's end. So you complete the task, you complete it, and your body says, okay, the threat is over. Let's relax now. We're safe. Now, the problem is that we often don't do this fourth stage, which is where the body knows that we're in relaxed state. Because one of the things that we do is we we finish one mountain and we bless ourselves by giving ourselves another mountain. Or there are so many things that are going on that we finish one thing, we just move straight on to the next. There's no way for our body to know that we actually completed anything. So instead of going stress goes up and then stress goes down, it goes stress goes up, complete stress goes up, stress goes up, 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 up. And that ends up happening with accumulation of stress in the body. Now, like I said, there's a optimal amount of stress for the body, right? Which keeps us alert. But once it goes into the red and that cortisol and adrenaline stays in that body, it gets toxic. So what you might be finding in the school situation is, if you find yourself constantly stressed, you'll start to find yourself having chronic illnesses, back pains. You might find yourself with headaches. You might find yourself sick sometimes and taking more sick leave and losing your mental capacity. You might forget things, or all those things might be manifesting in your life and not really realize these are connected to being so stressed for such a long period of time that you haven't had a chance to complete your stress cycle. So two questions for you to think about is, how does your body know the threat is over and you're now safe? So think about it. When was the last time you celebrated a win? When is the last time you booked annual leave just to rest instead of doing something for somebody else? And the second question is, your capacity for stress will impact how stressful it is for you, which I mentioned earlier on. So think to yourself, what elements of what you're going through at the moment are large in terms of impact of stress for you, and which ones are resilient, and how which ones are small, and how can you reduce the stress? Maybe it's something where you create some kind of group to go through this together. Maybe it's something where you need to face one of these challenges head on. Maybe it's something where you need support from your spouse or your union or something like that. Maybe there's something you can do right now which will help you relieve some of the stress so you're not handling it all by yourself. So one last thing, and I'm not going to go through this model right now, but this is an exercise I use with individuals as well as organizations, which is the stress mapping model. And what this does is you ask yourself questions which reveal what are the symptoms, causes, external stressors, which is what's happening to you, and the internal stresses, which is what's happening within you. Now, the reason why this is really important to map your stresses is that otherwise it feels like everything is against you at the same time. And it can be really overwhelming. One of the things I see often is having people describe the stress like a cloud that they just can't escape, or a storm that they're in constantly. And when you feel like that, it feels so ominous, so huge that it feels like there's nothing you can do. And so you feel like you've lost control, like you're trapped. Things like that are some of the images that people often use. So I would encourage you in the chats now to put something along, what does stress make you feel? What does stress feel like within your body? What are the symptoms? Like, how does it show up in your day-to-day choices, in your day-to-day experience? What external things make you feel stressed? What do you feel within your body, like I mentioned, or your peers? And what underlying issues tend to contribute? Maybe it's a mindset thing. Maybe it's the way you look at money. Maybe it's the way you look at time. Maybe you feel like you don't have enough time. Maybe you feel like you're getting older. Maybe you feel like you're too young. Maybe you feel like you're not in a position to be able to make the impact that you want. Maybe you feel like there's so many things going on that you don't know where to start. Maybe you feel like your finances are out of your control. Um, there could be a lot of different things that are making you feel stressed at the moment, and finances might be a whole bunch of those reasons. And it's good to map them so you can see where these things are coming from, because once you find the individual things that might be stressing you, you might realize that there's something you can do about some of them, right? So if we're talking about finances, for example, you might realize that actually one of the reasons why I'm feeling so stressed is that I'm constantly going, you know, hand to mouth. Like, a bill comes in and it goes out. So one of the things you might be thinking about is, okay, how can I reduce some of my spending? How can I increase some income? Maybe it's something where there's a way for you to, I don't know, do some of the work remotely. Maybe it's some help that you might need within your family, which will give you a little bit of relief. So there might be different things you can do. So we've had a couple of comments in the chats. We've got knots in your stomach, definitely. Shallow breathing, yeah, exactly. And that often happens. Shallow breathing is what your body naturally does when you're in a panic state, fight or flight. So it gives you a sudden rush of energy to the brain so that you can run, for example. But the thing with shallow breathing is when you do it constantly, it can actually give you too much adrenaline, which is why we feel feelings like anxiety. So those exercises I did at the beginning, which is the long, deep breaths. And I guess a third one I would offer you is to breathe out twice as long as you breathe in. So if you're breathing in for 3 seconds, breathe out for 6. and use that as a tool for you to start getting to yourself to a relaxed state. There was a study that was done which kind of offered this idea that nicotine isn't the only reason why smokers might smoke when they do. It's also the fact that smoking means that you have to inhale deeply and exhale for long as well. Because often we relatively use shallow breathing as a general way of life. We don't actually use our full capacity of breathing a lot of the time. Um, Talisha says, in me, it shows up as not being able to calm my mind. It's always running. 100%. 100%. So, and that's another thing as well. It's like how we perceive things is going to have an impact into how we ruminate over it, right? So, for example, there's going to be a lot of overthinkers in the room, self-proclaimed maybe, right? And overthinking, I've found to be, you can use it as a superpower as opposed to something that completely immobilizes you. Overthinking means that you think about everything that could go wrong. But the problem with overthinking is if that's all you do. So this is something my mom taught me actually, is if you're going to use the energy to overthink, use the energy to overthink your way out of it too. So don't just think about what's going wrong, but use that energy, that creativeness to think about what can I do about it, and ask those open-ended questions. If you're thinking this can go wrong, this can go wrong, this could go wrong, think to yourself, what could I do about this? What can I do about that? And what can I do about that? And one of the things that might help is maybe even taking yourself out of it, thinking if I wasn't me and I was someone else, what would they do? Think about it like that, because you might find that some ideas start flushing in that way. There's been a few times with me where I felt like I'm in a dead end situation. And the moment I think about, yeah, but if I was Denzel, then I might go up to this person, then I might go up to that person, I might have this kind of conversation. And then I realize actually what Denzel might do, I have access to as well, because all it is a conversation with the right person, or all it is expanding my network with people who can help, or all it is taking a walk in the park on instead of taking the bus home. Like it might be something simple as that you might do if you think to yourself, how can I look at this differently? And thank you for that, Talisha. And Linda's giving me hearts. Love it. Definitely. It sounds like something's resonating there. Okay, brilliant. So there's a few more things. I'm really going to go through these really quickly, but the 3 R's of sustainable well-being is number 1, regulate. We've done that before in terms of your nervous system, looking at the breathing, for example, to stop you spiraling. Number 2 is reframing, which is that mental thing I mentioned, which is changing how you view the stress so it doesn't control you. Number 3 is rebuild, which is looking at long-term habits. So making sure that you use your annual leave well, making sure you plan yourself to celebrate things when they happen instead of running through overtime, things like that. And then the final thing is a 3 level of sustainable well-being. You are not an island. You don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to expect everything to be on your shoulders. It might feel that way, but often there's a way for you to nurture the connections you have around you. Now, we've mentioned the stuff you can do by the self already, the 3 R's, but reach out to your network if you need, your friends, your family, your colleagues. But then also outside of that, there's the community. You might have people online. You might have, like I mentioned, community groups or what's the word I'm looking for, unions, or someone out there who you can connect with who might be a new connection, but might be aligned with you in some kind of way so that you can do this together. The main thing is not thinking to yourself, you have to move the mountain with your bare hands. There are people out there who you can help. All right. So I think that is it. So last thought for yourself, just to leave with as we go into the Q&A, is what's one short, medium, or long-term action you'll commit to as a result of this webinar? And I would encourage you to put this in the chat. What is one? Yeah, what would Denzel do? Honestly, it helped me through a lot. So what's one short, medium, or long-term action you will commit to as a result of this webinar? It could be as a result of what Natasha was saying about the financial habits and how we look at the finances, what you're doing next. Are you going to do the large, you're going to do the snowball effect approach? What is it that you're going to do that is going to help you? Like one of the things that I really like is the well-being review, right? So you might think to yourself, well, financial review. once a month I'm going to look at my finances. Or maybe a tip I saw once online is that, usually when you wake up, you might look at your phone. Look at your bank balance. It sounds really dumb, but often things come in and come out without us even being aware of it. So just pay attention to it, have a look at it and say, okay, give yourself a target maybe and say, okay, in 3 months, I would like to have taken this much off my debts, and pay attention to what those things might be. And it might be like Natasha saying here, deep breaths before I take an action or make a decision. Sometimes actually making a pause before you make a decision might be enough for you to make a one that is beneficial in the long term and not just the short term. I like this one here that says, I like reaching out to the community. You are not an island. 100%. 100%. You're really not. And sometimes, like I said, it can feel like it. I Someone said to me in a seminar I did once that it's only because I've got the people around me that I do. And one of the things I mentioned to them is that it didn't happen by accident. It's taken me years to get to the space where I can rely on the people around me. And it's been a conscious effort, but it's been an effort nonetheless. It was a time when I didn't feel like I could. So I decided I wanted people around me who I could rely on. And that came from one, being a person they could rely on. And then slowly that became reciprocal to the point where now I feel like I have a roster of people I can reach out to for anything. Talisha says, mapping out my financial habits, 100%, being intentional, not just making generic goals for the quarter. Yeah. And the thing is, you can use ChatGPT, you can look online at your favorite influencers, you can follow Natasha Bonsu, and you can see what she's giving you as ideas. But then it's really good to have something that works for you. Try these things, see what works, see what doesn't work, and try not to get really knocked back by the things that might not work immediately. Sometimes some of the things may take time because habits take time to change. So if you don't do it on day 4, it's okay. Day 5 is there. Jump back on the horse. Resilience is not just about falling off the horse. It's about getting back on it as well. So thank you so much. And I think that's it for me. I wanna offer this off as a Q&A. If there's any questions, since we're doing in terms of time, we're a bit, but we started off a little bit late, so we're going to give a little bit of time for questions. But any questions while we're here would be amazing. You can put them in the chats on LinkedIn or on YouTube if you're watching it there.
Andre, just to interject, Simu made a comment about, I like the reaching out to the community, you're not an island.
Yes, indeed. 100%, 100%. I'm glad that resonated because that took me a while as well. Awesome. Any questions, by the way, in the chats? Let me open this up. Let me see what we got here.
I'm reading it from my phone, not as yet. So
no problem.
If anybody has time to complete the feedback form, it really does help us align our message with everyone's needs so that we don't talk about things that maybe not resonate. So if you do have a few minutes, the document is on the chat to just let us know the feedback.
100%. And what I'll do as well is I will try and copy it and put it into the chats on LinkedIn as well. 1 second while I do that.
Andre's the technical guy. He knows how to do all of this very fast.
Listen, this thing very fast is stronger.
Oh, we have a question when you're done, Andre.
Okay, perfect. If you ask that question while I do this stuff in the back, that would be amazing.
Sure. How do you distinguish between mapping out your stresses, not harping on them?
Great question. And I love that question. Thank you so much for asking it. So they say pain is in the body, suffering is in the mind. And so you're quite right in terms of what is the kind of where does it go from being productive to unproductive in that sense? One of the things I would say is maybe give yourself a limit and say, I'm going to spend some time spiraling for 10 minutes and actually give yourself time for that. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I genuinely do this in our sessions because one of the things we sometimes do as well, which is the other side, is we don't give ourselves space to recognize how we actually feel and all the things that we might be panicking about. And we try and do this toxic positivity thing where it was like, everything's going to be okay. And let me not think about this thing. And I'm just going to do this thing for this. I'm going to do this plan that this millionaire does. And, it may not actually work for us. So one of the things I would say is actually give yourself time to recognize it. Don't just ignore it, but maybe give yourself a limit. If you find yourself, because the problem we have is that you might be still ruminating over it months down the line, right? And you're going over the same things. So maybe that might be a telltale sign. If you find yourself going over the same things without moving forward, that might be a time to leave it there and say to yourself, if I'm not going to have any new thoughts about this issue, I'm going to now go to the solutions, right? So give yourself a container for it. Try not to let it just spill out into your whole life, because otherwise you're just going to spend the whole time there. And then, like I said, it doesn't do any good for you in your body. One of the examples I give is, if I'm going to have a deadline in 3 weeks and I spend that 3 weeks thinking about all the things that could go wrong, there's going to be a physiological impact to my body in that time. It's going to feel stressful. It's going to feel horrible. And I'm not going to have any joy within that 3 weeks. But then when that thing happens, it might not even happen a lot of the time. If we actually think about the things that could go wrong, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's a, a genius thing that might happen, or something, an idea might come in week 2. But what could also happen is something could go wrong, but something could go right. So if I spend my time also thinking about what could go right in that time, there's a different physiological thing that happens in the body. And one thing my mom always said is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. If things go wrong, can I still be okay?
Mm.
That is your baseline. Will I survive this? Right? If you know you can survive this, then okay, cool, I can handle whatever happens. And
Mm.
then you can think about what could go right, because often we just don't give ourselves capacity for that. Um,
Yes.
we've got another question saying, any bite-sized tips from Natasha? I missed your part.
Oh, I'll quickly summarize mine. My biggest bite size for anybody pertaining to financial well-being. We all have good habits and bad habits. Find out what you're good at with your money. Are you good at saving? Are you good at investing? Give yourself a tick, give yourself a pat on the back. And the things that you think you're not very good at, let's start working on them. It's your Achilles heel overspending, then we'll start tackling that issue. Is your issue not opening the letters from the creditors? Let's start opening them one letter at a time, just to be aware of what they are asking of us. Then we can now find out what we can do after that. But ignoring the letters doesn't help. And then I discussed, do we have an emergency fund? I think all of us here have experienced COVID. Obviously, for me, 8th of March, lockdown, 9th of March, I had work. We all had work, but not all of us can work from home, which highlights to a lot of us that we're not financially resilient. So with the changes in AI and technology, our jobs are not as secure as they once were. What are we doing just in case we do lose our job? Just in case we go into hospital for 6 weeks or 6 months? Do we have sufficient funds to keep us ticking over until we've recovered? So those are really the biggest tips from today. We are all good at something. What are you good at with money? Tick yourself, tick, tick, tick. What are you not good at? And let's see if we can work them out in small chunks. So that is, in summary, a lot of the tips that I gave today, plus others. But I think that's the biggest one I want everybody to take away with today.
Perfect. Look at that. All the value you can have in the space of an hour. All right. So we've got
Yeah.
maybe about 5 minutes left. Since we wanted to keep it to roughly to an hour. If there's any other questions, please do ask them into the chat. Just put them into the LinkedIn or the YouTube, depending on where you're watching it. And what we'll do is we'll come back to them and be able to answer them after this. So don't think just because it's not answered within this particular space that it won't be. Periodically, we'll go back to them and answer them if there's anything that comes up, because what you might have a question about, someone else might have a question about. And what I find is there's no question too small. sometimes we think to ourselves, oh, it's a question, but this is probably a dumb thing that everybody knows. I promise you, if this is something that you don't know, there's someone out there who also doesn't know it. So make sure to put them into the chats. And they say insightful points. Thank you, Natasha. See, she's dope. That's why she's a consultant. Okay. Um, the last thing, actually, just to round this up, is just to point out that at the beginning, I mentioned there's going to be an offer. So Natasha and I have really been sitting here thinking about how we can help schools and how we can help this situation. Now, one of the ways we can do that is with this webinar series. So we're coming on here for free. We're saying we're sharing some of our expertise that we've come through, me in terms of burnout, Natasha in terms of financial wellness. And there was just this overly big, like, synergy in what we were doing that we wanted to share with you. But we also recognize that as a schooling system, you might find yourself in a space where you're not the only one of your peers, of your colleagues who might be experiencing some of this stress. And so we've put together a package, which is something that we're offering to schools, right? And obviously you can come to us individually. Natasha has her own services. I have my own services. If you need help specifically with finances, you can contact her directly. If you need specific help with stress and how to handle it, you can contact me directly. But if you're in a school which needs CPD, if you have yourself a term time, and you have external people that do come in from time to time, we would encourage you to get in touch with us and share what I'm about to share on screen, which is the Educators Burnout and Financial Wellness Wellbeing Accelerator. So this one is something which we put together, and there's 4 basic elements of it. Number 1 is 2 deep dive training sessions, which are kind of like this. So we're going to bring our expertise. The first one is on burnout recovery and stress mastery, and the second one is on financial confidence for educators, right? And the second element is a live Q&A, because from that and from your own experiences, you're going to have questions similar to this. You're going to think to yourself, yeah, but there's something really specific to me and my needs that may not have been covered, or you might need specific tools or anything that might come up. And that one is part of it as well. It's kind of like how we had at the end here, but a whole hour of it, right? And the third element is an implementation playbook. Yes, it's great knowing all these things, but how do you actually implement it into your day-to-day life? So we're putting together a resource which allows a workbook which allows you to take all this information and put them into a day-to-day work. And then the last bit, which is more of a bonus, is a checklist. So finances and stress, a whole heap of things you can tick off and say, okay, cool, I'm doing really well on this right now, but maybe this bit needs some attention. And it's an audit effectively. So it's something you can use as your monthly review, like I mentioned earlier on. Maybe it's something you can give to your friends and family and say, you know what, this is something that I think we can do. It's got a lot of low-hanging fruits and maybe some things that maybe require a little bit more attention. But within the 4, it's a package that we offer to schools as well. And it's a structured system for managing your stress. It's actionable. It gives you a clear path to resilience, really, and confidence. So one of the things that Natasha mentioned is, once you start to handle these things, you'll start to feel more confident. And imagine what it'll feel like getting to a stage where you're making decisions where finances aren't the number one factor motivator of making these decisions, right? And then, of course, there's some extras that some institutions might need, right? So we can offer one-to-one coaching as well, and we have a 6-week group coaching program which we can add on to it. And that is something that you can offer to the schools as well. So if you're in a school and you're like, oh, this Natasha and Andre combo, we need that for the next term, then get in touch with us direct. In the chats, there is a feedback link, but then there's also, if I am to go back to it, there's a feedback link, but then there's also a link to book a call with us. Oops, daisy. Yeah, a feedback link, but also a link to book a call with us directly. We'll sit with you, and with that, we'll give you help as to how to approach the school if you want to bring us in. Yeah, and I think that's it. Natasha, is there anything else that I may have missed?
No, I've put the call link in the chat. No, you have been very succinct, Andre. Very good.
Okay, amazing. Final call for questions as we're here. Any thoughts either on the package or on the financial wellness side or on the stress and burnout side while we round up? Just give a few minutes for that. And like I said, if there are any questions that happen after this, then please do just put them in the chats and we'll come back to it. This is the good thing about LinkedIn now that it's upgraded to this, because before it was audio rooms, and once the audio rooms complete, then poof, it's gone. The good thing about this is, as a room, it will stay here. So the link that you have for the event, you will always have, and you'll always be able to come back and watch it again. And what I would encourage is, if you are with a school and you think, oh, actually, this might be something that my school could do with, because there's quite a few of us. Maybe it's for the staff, maybe it's even for the parents of the teachers. If you want to offer it to them, you can send them the link to this episode, if you will, and they can use that as a resource as well. Talisha is asking, are these lives going to be a weekly thing? Yeah, so this is a series. So there's 6 episodes, if you will. This is number 2, but we do them twice. The first one is going to be on Zoom, which is more in an intimate space. So we had the first one on Zoom last week, and this week is going to be on LinkedIn. So next week is going to be the next topic, which is going to be on Zoom. And if you're interested in that, please do put your interest within the chats as well, and we'll make sure to include you in the links with that. There's a bit more of a sign up process with that one for the Zoom, because we're going to ask you questions about what your needs are and what your challenges are, so we can make sure we can answer those questions within the presentation. And then the week after that is going to be on LinkedIn, but we're doing the same thing effectively. So on LinkedIn, it's going to be every 2 weeks, if that makes sense. Yeah. Talisha saying, I would definitely tune in. Perfect. Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing you again. All these people, all you who have been here, what we might do is just send you the link for you to sign up for the Zoom if you want it. Like I said, it's more of an intimate space. It's not public like this. And so you'll be in a Zoom call with us, especially if you have specific questions you want to ask. It's probably better for that. But otherwise, I think that's it from me. Natasha.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. We appreciate your time, and I hope you can use these tips and well-being actions this week.
Awesome. And remember the questions I asked. What are the actions that you're going to commit to maybe this week? Think to yourself that way. And if you join us for the Zoom, then we'll see you next week. Or if you're just going to be watching us on the LinkedIn, then we'll see you in 2 weeks. But keep an eye out for any information that we have, because we're going to be doing this over and over again. We really want to help, because we know how much this can be an issue for a lot of us. So thank you, and you'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys.